What do your favorite movie, song, and the future of AI have in common? Today's guest, Tiankai Feng, is the Director of Data and AI Strategy at ThoughtWorks, a TEDx speaker, musician, and the author of Humanizing Data Strategy. He rewrites iconic movie tunes to explain business, leadership, and the wonderful world of data and AI. He's here to prove that creativity and data aren't opposites. They are the spark behind real breakthroughs. Stay with us until the end as he shares a powerful secret about creativity, curiosity, and why reinventing the box might be your smartest move yet. Let's dive in with Tiankai. Welcome to the episode of Reinventing the Box. How I got to know you is about your music. It was very interesting because you were sharing office situations using very famous lyrics from Disney and you were doing your own creative spark on that. Let's start with your story. What brought you where you are? How all these creative spark of using music to humanize data came to life?
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for having me. It's really nice to be here. I would always say my musician journey started much earlier than my data journey because I started playing the piano when I was 5. At least my parents asked me to go to piano classes. So I've been then from taking piano classes really gotten more passionate about it over the years. And I was a part of bands and big bands. I wrote songs. And even during my studies where I was studying business administration and engineering, which was very, I would say, technology and business heavy, I was still doing my side job as a bar pianist to earn my rent for my flat. In many ways, it was always converging in my side, my musician self and my professional self, so to say. But it wasn't until I would say now 5-6 years ago where I actually were bold enough to combine the talents and to show my musical talents at work as well. And I think especially during COVID times, which is the videos that you saw, right? There was so much weird things going on in the world where I was stuck at home and I needed to decompress about all of that was going on. So making these fun music videos about being in home office, stuck at home and how it feels like became a thing that I could use as self-therapy, but I was so glad that it was resonating for the rest of the community as well, especially on LinkedIn, for example. And since then, I've gotten more and more comfortable with it. I'm using my music and my creative talents and skills to make topics around data that usually seem very dry or very complicated, more engaging and fun. And I try to always bring it back to human factors too, right? Which is why I also wrote a book about it, called Humanizing Data Strategy. We are all humans, and data makes it sound like the opposite of being human, but in the end, it's actually about combining it because we're using facts to make better decisions. We're using facts to take better actions, and all of those facts are based in good data, and that's what we should.
You mentioned 3 things that are very important. We believe that innovation happens not because you have an aha moment, it's because you're there to step in those bold moments and combine these things that seem so unrelated, like data, music, humanity, into one thing, and then you create something new. And I think you have created a movement, right? You were a TEDx speaker in Nuremberg. You're changing in a bit the space that feels a bit too dry, too numbers driven. One of the things that I want to ask you, how would you define creativity based on your experience? How would you encourage people to be creative? And what has it been the reaction of you doing this, like music with data and humanizing the aspect of a profession that could feel very data-driven, decision-driven?
I mean, I think creativity really for me is the ability to come up with original ideas in a very basic way. But I think what makes it special is when you get to use that ability or that skill of being creative. Because my theory is that it usually comes under the circumstances of having a necessity, something that makes it urgent for you to be creative. And of course, that means usually when you're under pressure, let's say the typical of the situation is you have a limited budget, you cannot spend as much money as you thought you would. So you find a different way to make it happen with far little more resources than you thought. That is a way of creativity. But even when I think of a new song that I want to write, I feel the necessity of expressing myself because I'm either really frustrated or I'm really inspired about something. But I need to turn it down into writing stuff, into lyrics and chords and some music, and I need to bring it down. it always comes in the end from a place of urgency and necessity, I feel like. And that also means that these situations under which you can sense the necessity or urgency can be partially artificially created too. And that is what I think also happens in the business reality. Whenever you get certain boundaries set for you, this is where we all strive to be really creative. We need to find a way within those boundaries to find a way to make the best possible outcome. And it's very similar then for me, how I then think about my music and think about how I behave at work, where with the certain rules that I know about, I find the best possible solution within that space. And then I just do it. It might be a Disney parody of or home office songs because I feel the need to express how tiring it is to talk about the same sentences in home office all the time over and over again. Or it might be a meme that I create because I feel like this is the best way to explain what I'm dealing with an intuitive picture that everyone can get behind and laugh.
You mentioned something very important. It's an human need. Sometimes we think like some people are born to be creative, designers, artists, but within us, we have the need to express in a way how we are sensing and seeing the world.
Absolutely.
For example, I'm not a very fan of the phrase creative thinking. Creation is an outcome of doing, not thinking.
True.
So you had an idea and you express it to the world, but you were bold enough. So I think you encapsulate what creativity is, just taking your ideas, put it into the world and be bold. Whatever happens is going to happen. And look where it got you. I'm very happy that you tried out. And it's an example of what you said, how we're expressing, how we're seeing life and our professions. In terms of humanizing data, like data is something very dry, but also data tells a story. It's a story. If you have a bunch of data, but you don't know how to tell the story of the data, in a sense, what are you going to do with that data? You're very good at storytelling. How would you define, and I know you wrote the book, so you can tell us about framework that you had in the book. So what is your definition of humanizing data, why it's important, and how can we take this approach from any discipline or work that we're doing and take a more human approach to what we're doing?
Absolutely. In a way, what I define as humanized data strategy is a counter movement to where I feel is becoming more and more technology centric. Because in the end, as I mentioned before, data is there for human beings to make better decisions. But if we only focus on technology and not about the human beings that are using the data, then it becomes kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy where the data is just to exist and not to actually generate any value. So by being humanized basically more in how we do data management or data strategy in enterprises, I hope that we find the way back to being more human-centric again. And you mentioned the 5Cs framework. This is exactly what is in the core of it. The 5Cs are for me rooted in human needs and human traits. And they should be all within us already. And we just need to actually leverage them to attach it to the field of data. And the 5Cs are competence, communication, collaboration, creativity, and conscience. And all of these have a meaning. And for example, you mentioned storytelling. That's part of communication because we want to not only convince clearly, but also actionably and also memorably, right? In the end. And it's all part of basically how we talk to each other, how we work with each other, how we need to grow all together, how we need to learn about the right things, how we need to know how to do the right things and be ethically and legally on the right side. And all of that comes together and be one.
Yes, I really like that you're putting it in a framework because it's easier for people to understand and replicate.
Exactly.
It's also the same thing with innovation. People think it's an aha moment and it happens, but it's actually a process. So the more you learn the process of doing something, the better you're going to become at it. And now it brings us a very interesting topic, which is AI, because AI, it's based on the data, like the large language models, everything is on the data we are training. So what is something that you're seeing right now happening in terms of the relationship data and AI? And you mentioned something very important, and how I see like we're seeing two paths, like automating everything, or how are we going to shape the future? Are we going to do it more human-centric? I'm part of the second group that I wanted to make it more, it's not automating, it's a tool. So tell us your perspective. What have you seen in the business world? What's broken? What needs to be changed? How as consumers and employees and people can shape that?
Absolutely. I would also, first of all, shortly say that I would belong to the latter group that you mentioned, more about using it as a tool. But I would phrase it in a way to say, no matter how automated AI gets, human beings still need to be in the steering wheel. And both in a literal and a metaphorical sense, because literally it really means we need to still steer and we need to know what happens with AI, what they do. And we cannot just let them do their own thing without us actually knowing what is happening. But metaphorically also in our own behavior and mindset, where if we are asking for ideas from a chatbot, for example, like ChatGPT, then are we actually priming it to follow what is closest to our own idea and we find the best solution ourselves? Or we don't have any ideas and we just listen to whatever ChatGPT says? It's a big difference, because in the end, either we are just blindly following or we are shaping it towards what we want to have. And that is the main difference in how we interact with it too. And in that way, the main necessity comes also from morality, because I think what we human beings have born with is a moral compass. For some reason, we all know that it is bad to kill people and that it is good to be nice to people. And that moral compass in many varieties can change over time, right? Like, for example, in the past, slavery was allowed and encouraged. Now slavery is completely unacceptable. That society made the moral compass change over time too. But if we imagine only feeding historical data to a chatbot or AI, they're going to learn. They don't know what's right or wrong, but they will learn from all of what we did in the past. And we know that not all we did was right. So the only way to keep it up to date to our current moral compass is if we keep on still taking actions ourselves, and we can help AI understand that our moral compass is evolving. In that way, that is like I think the big societal picture around AI. From an enterprise point of view, I think it's much more about job security and more about the mindset, how we want to evolve enterprises with human beings. In a way, there's a lot about AI might replace people. That means lots of layoffs. Even CEOs are bold enough nowadays to say they're going to lay off a lot of people. They think they're going to lay off many people because of AI. But I think it's going to be different. It's not actually removing jobs. It's evolving jobs. Because whoever was doing a routine manual task day to day, that part might be automated in the future. But somebody still needs to coordinate and oversee all of these manual automation, the manual tasks that were automated, that they're still doing the right thing, like a quality assurance or like a coordinator. That is a perfect evolution of the job from before, where someone who exactly knows how it works can be a great overseer to actually then see how it's going on. And that a lot of jobs need to evolve. And I think that is part of seeing it in a more humanized way. And instead of seeing human versus AI, it's actually human with AI together evolving into a common future.
You mentioned something very important, and we came back to this humanity, like moral conscious, and we have a choice how we're going to shape the technology. I feel like as we're in a crossroads where we're going to decide. Not only the big tech companies are going to decide, but we as a consumer, how we want to interact and use the technology. And we sometimes forget that we have the power to shape that, because if we stop using something, it's not going to go very well for business. I think the more we understand that, no, it's not everyone else above you deciding, it's you as a consumer. And what you said is very important. If we decide voluntarily to outsource it's going to be outsourced. It's going to be automated with ChatGPT or whoever language model you're using, shaping it as a tool, not as a replacement. And I also believe that companies will see very clearly when you automate everything, it's going to be not so successful. And why? Because of data. What you just said, like large language models or everything is trained on historical data. When you're doing that, where is the innovation? You get cookie cutter solutions. I think this concept of human in the loop will be very relevant. We as an employee or consumer need to understand that we have the power, we're going to shape it. And I love the concept where you're bringing up to the table is humanizing data and AI. From the data perspective, can creativity help us be more responsible and inclusive data and AI? What do you think is the relationship between?
Yes, I absolutely think so. And the reason why I think so is that part of being more inclusive and part of being just a better person is recognizing your own biases and your own mistakes, even in the past. But you wouldn't do that unless you are reflective enough to think that you can improve and that you are at any given time always able to be better. And that is what I think is very common in the space of creativity too. Because creativity is always, is there a better idea? Is there a better way to do something? Is there something else that I can contribute to the world that makes it better? And that is a very similar mindset. I think if we are channeling it towards is this really the best I can do about being inclusive? Either I'm working on algorithm, I might be also just working on the communication of a PowerPoint, right? Either way, is this the best I can do to be inclusive in that space and then reflect on it to then improve? I think that requires creativity and the humility also to apply it in the right way. In the data space, inclusivity is a very interesting one because in the data space, which was in the past, the outsider area, which needed to fight for a seat at the table, it became more and more important, especially also due to the hype of AI. Now, everyone talking about good data is needed for good AI. But the concepts that data folks created in the past, like data literacy, for example, makes it sound the opposite because it sounds like if you're not literate enough the data, you cannot play with us. You cannot be part of us data professionals. And now basically the field of data created its own hurdle around it, its own kind of boundaries around it, and makes it very hard to get in. My point of view is here to just find a balance, right? We need to come together again. We need to make it open enough, but also are nice enough to teach them. We shouldn't make it like a hurdle for them to join because we welcome people. We should welcome them to be more literate and more knowledgeable about data so we can all work towards actually the right space. And we owe it to ourselves to make data an inclusive field because we were the ones being excluded in the past. So what makes that good for us to now exclude others? So that is, I think, the very special context of working in data. And also with my own background, I think I mentioned that in the book too, having with Chinese parents, but having been born and raised in Germany, I have felt that exclusion when I was growing up here. And even in China, when I was there, I would feel my relatives not seeing me as a real Chinese person because I was talking and behaving differently. So I know the feeling about always being excluded. So I don't want to make the same mistake to others. I want to make sure everyone's feels included. And that all starts with individual choices.
What you're doing is great because you're making data more accessible, even through a song. Like someone that would not be interested in data, just listening to your songs, understand a bit more the context of data and how it's used, democratizing not only data, but AI. How can you make it so simple? The moment you understand something, you're able to shape it.
Absolutely. Yes.
I have a kind of like design thinking challenge in terms of how are we reinventing the box, how we're humanizing things. If you could redesign the typical corporate way to look at data and make it more human. I think we touch a bit upon on this, but if you have a specific use case that you can say, what would you keep? What would you take away? And what would you totally reinvent?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say it actually comes down not to the technology or the artifacts, it comes down to the process itself. Just as like design thinking is meant as like a process to go through, we should apply the way in corporate environments about data too. And just as in design thinking, you should start with the actual customer and someone who has a problem and not just with the solution immediately. And this is where I would already say 80% of the problems in data start, where we build a solution first and not know whose problem we're actually solving with it. Because just it's nice as a technology, so we do it, but nobody actually is going to use it. And that creates a lot of confusion about why is the data team even doing this? Who is it for? Nobody's using it. In my ideal world, it all starts with business users actually understanding their day-to-day and understanding where data and the right information at the right time can help them make better decisions. And that might be anyone needs information in the day-to-day. A sales manager needs customer data to write to the right people. A marketing manager needs to know their marketing spend data to make better choice about how to optimize their spending. A finance person needs to know how much they're controlling and if they're over or under budget. There's so many things where they need data. And only by mapping it down, we can then identify where data makes more sense. And the good thing is, if we do it in that approach, then we are bringing the business people into the boat of making that decision together. And we're not doing it in isolation and then selling it to them. We are together identifying what actually brings in the most. And that creates an environment of collaboration directly too, because we want to together solve your problem is better than here, take my solution, do whatever you want with it. I'm not sure if you can use it, but here you go. So that's the difference. So I think that's the main part I would change. Start with problem statements from the business side and not with technology and excitement. Just because we can do it doesn't mean we should do it.
You remind me of something that I talk very often, like people, companies, startups say, if we build it, people will come. So we have this, just need more data, more marketing, more analytics, more budget. But in reality, it's the other way around. What is the real need and how am I solving the problems or the needs of my users? So coming back again to this human-centric approach of doing things. I think we have been gone so far way out to productivity, automation, results, forgetting that what is going to take us forward, especially in this phase, is coming back to understanding and humanizing data and AI and everything we do. Looking forward, what kind of relationships do you want people to have with data in 5 to 10 years from now? You said now it's like gatekeeping some aspects of data. What's your ideal scenario in 5, 10 years from now about how people feel with data? And
I would hope that the relationship to data is a little bit like people's relationship to books in a library, I would compare it to. Because everyone knows what to expect in the library, and you kind of know, even if you're just there to not find a specific book, you will find your way to look for books that might be interesting for you and that you might need for either entertainment or to make a decision or something. And that requires two things. One is that everyone is comfortable with it, just like reading text, because everyone is literally literate, right, with it, and they know how to read letters, just like how they can read data in the future. But also that data is being managed and provided in a way that seems like an intuitive library too. It requires both sides to come together. And what makes it even more exciting is actually with AI that we don't need to actually have people code any queries anymore to actually deal with the data, but they can also just chat with the data in the future. And thereby they're basically making this a bit more intuitive how they attack.
I think there is a big buzzword whenever you're working or applying for jobs or on your own enterprises. It's like, we are very data driven. You need to take data by heart. How would we make sense of the new definition of data driven?
Data driven is an interesting concept because it was almost in every statement of companies where they said in the last years they want to become more data driven. In a way, I feel like data driven is if you have a whole continuum of where you're more opinion based or if you're more data based. Data driven is on the very end of the one side where you're actually not having any human being making the decision anymore, but it's purely based on the data itself. An example would be, right, like dynamic pricing on e-commerce websites. Like Amazon, they are continuously changing the prices every hour or so based on what they think is the right price based on demand and offering and so on. And that happens automatically already. But not every decision in companies should be data driven then, right? Because we cannot make life-changing decisions trusting an algorithm to do it on the completely, right? Like salaries. We couldn't just say, let an algorithm reset all of the salaries of all the people and then we're good. That still requires things. So there's more nuanced versions of it that I believe we can talk about. For example, data informed is a little bit more of a level because that implies that the human being is still making the decision, but they are being informed directly with the right data about it. And then I have another one called data inspired, where you don't have exactly the data that you need, data that you can infer from or you can extrapolate from to then kind of have a better gut feeling towards what the right choice is. So in a way, data-driven is okay in many cases and probably valuable, but not everything should be data-driven. And it's about us making more conscious choices, what should be data-driven and what should.
I'm going to ask you something about, I know your new book is coming out.
Yeah.
Tell us about your new book a bit, and because it's about AI and data.
Yeah, exactly. So the new book is going to be called Humanizing AI Strategy. And it's literally and spiritually the successor of my previous book, Humanizing Data Strategy. The main common theme is that I'm also applying the 5 Cs, but towards AI. But what makes it very different, and that was the whole starting point why I wrote that second book, is when in data, it was all about asking people to use it more, to create more value with it. With AI, it's almost the opposite because it's already everywhere. Everyone has access so easily to AI tools. So it's not about using it more, it's about using it more wisely for the right things and doing the right tasks with it. And that creates a whole different story around how the 5 Cs are being interpreted and how they should be applied. I talk a lot then about how we can treat, for example, AI agents as colleagues as well. But if we are colleagues, then shouldn't there be some kind of an agreement who takes care of what and not just blindly doing something with it? It's also about a bigger chart about conscience because bias, disinformation, all of these topics are real topics that we're dealing with today. And if we don't act on them to prevent them or to mitigate them, then we have a much bigger problem. I'm very excited to share my point of view on how to humanize AI more. It's going to be familiar, but also at the same time, I think providing some additional value about how to humanize AI.
Do you have any date when it's coming out?
I think it's in 4 weeks, but it's not set yet. I'm working with the publisher because there are some decisions that we need to still make about the cover design and everything. But I can promise that I will be very vocal on LinkedIn about whenever I have have more information. And then hopefully the specific release date will be out there soon.
And that brought me to a question that maybe is not so related to data, but just came to my mind. What's the process of writing a book? How was your experience doing that? How did you take the leap, another bold move to do a book? So tell us about that, because I'm interested about
Sure. It's interesting because that is a thing that really almost came to me. What happened was in 2023, I had translated a book. That book was called Disrupting Data Governance by Laura Metzen. I translated it from English to German for the German-speaking community. And that went really well. I had a little bit of a longer leave between jobs, and I thought intellectually I want to do something for the community. It went really well. I worked really well together with the publisher, and that was really a really nice thing. And by the end of that year, the publisher himself, they asked me if I want to write my own book. And at that time, I was like, if I'm being asked to write my own book, I shouldn't say no. This is like a once in a lifetime opportunity. Let me think what I would write about. And I thought about everything I'm passionate about, what I think is not being written about too much yet. And that led me to the topic of humanizing data strategy. And one thing led to another, I started writing it. I have to say, I didn't have to start completely from zero because I had elements of it in previous talks and keynotes at conferences that I already had. That made it a little bit easier just to have a basis and to start working on it. But I think what made it tricky is to say where to find the right balance of going broad and going deep. And by starting to outline my thoughts into a literal mind map, actually, I was thinking how much I have to make it bigger or rather longer. So it's has been in many ways an interesting choice. And I'm not going to lie, I think writing the book for the first time was a lot connected to imposter syndrome too. Who am I to write a book? Who would read my books? I have no idea what this is for. A lot of self-doubt. And all of that led to still me finishing the book. And I'm so glad that it's actually resonated with the community. And that made actually writing the second one much easier because all of the self-doubt was gone. I had the experience of knowing where to find the balance between being broad and being deep. So in a way, I already could learn from my own experiences, and I was much faster this time around, which is why already 1 year later after the first book, I'm already releasing the second one, and I'm very happy that it works.
How long was it, the process from starting the book until publishing?
The first one took 8 months, and now the second one, I would say, takes 5 months. Okay. It comes out in 4 weeks.
You mentioned something about deciding the cover. I really like your cover because it's not like a typical data book cover. Is really creative and engaging. How did that came about? Because I know don't judge a book by its cover, but you do.
In that case, it works.
That's a great cover to do a book.
There is a really strong design team at the publisher house. And based on how they thought my writing style and what they knew about me, they actually gave me 10 options to choose from for the cover. And what was interesting is usually other authors only get 4 or 5 options, I was told. But for me, there was so much in there that they didn't know how to actually make it less than 10 options. So they just gave me all the 10 for me to choose. And it's funny because I actually made it a LinkedIn activity back then to say, help me choose. I made a short list of 4 that I really liked. And the one you see now is one of the 4. And I made the audience choose basically and help me vote for it. And it came down to 2 very different ones. One was the colorful one that you saw now. And the other one was a literal brain and a heart together, but much more nuanced and a little bit more warm colors, but not as colorful, just like purple, kind of reddish. And I decided for the one that you're seeing now because it reflected my personality the most, I would have said, right? I'm really glad that it works. And exactly for that reason, I am not a normal one in the data space either. I'm known for being creative and a little bit quirky and more entertaining than the rest. And why should I hide behind it? I kind of just made it my own. Back then, I also thought that's going to be the only book in my life that I will ever write. I didn't know I was going to write a second one yet. But now that the second one's coming, I'm looking forward to what options I have, and I will see how I will choose. Maybe involve the LinkedIn community again. Who knows? Let's see how it goes.
You encapsulate what you're all about. You use human-centric approach, design, asking your followers, users, what do you like? That's a great approach that we can learn from you. The other thing is that you did something bold, believing yourself and putting yourself out there. I think there is a lot of people, and that's part of what this pod is about. It's like you have a story to tell. Your unique things that you think are unique and weird, they are there for a reason. So how do you step in, take the bold move and do it? Because I guess if you have never put that song out, if you have never translated that book when the opportunity came, your story would have been much different.
That is so true.
I think one of the things that inspires me from you is that, like, authenticity in a world where everything is numbers and data and you should be this way. You are saying, no, there is another way. And I think a lot of people that have changed many industries are like that. I'm going to be myself and then let's see what happens. One of the things that I like to know, and I'm going to ask you 2 closing questions. What surprising connection you made between things that most people would never think? Is there something like a moment that you said, oh, these could work together? And how did that happen in your life?
One of the ones that for me was one of the more entertaining associations that you already brought up is actually Disney music and home office. That I somehow in my head, I realized that you could use the phrases we use in home office that we do in virtual meetings and apply it. Sounds like, can you feel the love tonight becomes, can you see my screen right now? Those were like the things that in my head, and I had no idea where it came from, but in my head, I was just made click and I associated those two. And then that became a whole viral video, Disney songs about home office. But I feel like where it comes from is whenever I take mundane things that happen in my day to day and I dissect them in my head and then I turn it into something else, which is why I'm able to also create memes or jokes about it, because there's always some universal truth in there that a lot of other people are experiencing too. And that's why it resonates with them, because I gave it a different spin and everyone can now laugh about it instead of just being bored by it or being annoyed by it. In a way, also, the whole thing about working in data is not that different than working with music. I also often talk about that association itself is not being made that often either. But I like to really talk about it in many ways. I even bring analogies. Let's do a jam session. And I would call like a brainstorming just a jam session, because that's how musicians would brainstorm. They would just have one common ground and then we now all jam on it. And yeah, those are the kind of things that I like to combine, and they're all rooted in my own interests, in my passions, hobbies, and what makes me me.
And it reminds me of something like we are putting things in boxes. This is data, this is creativity, this is music. But the moment we understand what you understood is that why there's limit. Everything connects, and the more you find those connections, the better you're going to be at what you're doing, and also the better you're going to make the world. So I think that's true. Like, let's get rid of every boxes and just be authentic and follow your curiosity, because I think one of the things as humans, and that would not be replaced by anything, it's our curiosity that has brought us to create AI, and not only AI, but many things. So follow your curiosity, get rid of the box, and be bold to do that. As a takeaway, I want you to leave us with something that you would like the audience to take from this. What can we walk away from this and apply, for example?
I would say, actually, let's bring it back to the topic of creativity. If you think you have a good idea, do everything in your power just to try it out and turn it into a reality. And even if it feels awkward because no one had ever done it before, or you don't even know how people are going to react, as long as it's not offensive or stepping on anyone's toes, there's nothing bad that can actually happen. The worst is it doesn't resonate with people, but that's already it. Then you just try another idea until it resonates. But the possibilities of trying out something new are so much higher than the safety of not doing it, that I would just encourage everyone to follow their own passions and creativity and try new things once in a while.
Perfect. Yes. And thank you so much, because that was the best close for the podcast. And this is me also trying out to do a podcast.
Yeah.
I'll put the links of your Spotify, because they need to hear your songs for sure.
Yeah.
The book, and we'll see each other in the virtual space again. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Reinvent the Box. If something sparked your curiosity today, follow it. That spark, it's where innovation begins, where bold ideas meet real world impact. We don't think outside of the box. We reinvent. With creativity, strategy, and human-centered innovation, you just don't launch ideas. You build what works. That's the heart of the Innovationist Playbox and the unboxing journey. Until next time, keep reinventing.